Never drive this Arizona highway at night. I was on a military assignment traveling from Atlanta, Georgia to Portland, Oregon. The Army gave me 6 days to report to my new base, and I was thrilled for the journey. I've always loved road trips. The solitude of the open road feels like true freedom. My plan was to cover as much ground as possible on the first day so I could take a detour through Nevada for a brief getaway. It was February with short daylight hours, so I started early. I packed my last belongings into my Honda Civic, checked out of my old unit, and hit the road by 4:30 a.m. The day was breathtaking. I watched the scenery shift as I drove west, farther than I'd ever been. From Atlanta's bustling suburbs to the rolling hills of Alabama, then into the humid flatlands of Mississippi, and finally the scrublands of the Southwest. As I crossed the state line, a sign greeted me, "Welcome to Arizona, the Grand Canyon State." I was truly in the middle of nowhere now. On State Route 89, I passed through Prescott, a charming little town. I could have pushed on to Flagstaff, but I decided to stop and explore Prescott's historic district. As someone fascinated by the odd and unsettling, I couldn't resist checking out the local lore. I figured I'd never pass this way again. The next day, I drove to Flagstaff, then headed north on US Route 93 toward the Arizona-Nevada border. My goal was to reach Kingman, my stop for the night, but I still had 3 hours of driving ahead. Sunset was at 5:30 p.m., and darkness was already creeping in. I grabbed a coffee at a gas station to stay alert for the final leg. It should have been a simple drive, just a straight shot through the desert. But looking back, if I'd stayed in Flagstaff the previous night instead of stopping in Prescott, I might have reached Nevada by now and avoided the terror waiting for me on that isolated highway. Route 93 cut through the Hualapai Reservation, surrounded by vast desert plains and distant, shadowy mesas under a star-strewn sky. To my right, the horizon glowed a faint crimson, the last light fading like a dying campfire until the world was swallowed by night. Occasionally, I'd see the faint glow of another car's headlights passing by, a small comfort that I wasn't completely alone. My playlist kept me company, and ironically, Riders on the Storm by The Doors was playing. After passing the tiny settlement of Wickiup, the next sign of life would be Chloride, a ghost town turned tourist spot. Between them lay a 40-mile stretch of desolate emptiness, a void I had to cross. I had no idea what I was about to encounter. Several miles in, with no other cars in sight, I noticed a shape on the horizon, faintly illuminated by the moonlight. At first, I thought it was a mile marker. As I got closer, I realized it was a person walking along the shoulder, heading toward me. I strained my eyes to see them in the dark. They wore a hooded cloak, with long dark hair spilling down their back. Who would be out here alone at night? They had no lights, no reflectors, nothing to signal their presence to drivers, and they walked dangerously close to the road. I veered slightly to the right to give them space. Suddenly, my car's audio system shut off. The dashboard screen went black, and my phone disconnected from Bluetooth. It wasn't unheard of for this to happen, so I didn't think much of it. As I got closer, the figure raised their left arm, as if trying to hitch a ride. No way, I thought. I'm not stopping out here. As my headlights passed over them, I saw it was a woman in a faded denim jacket, a tattered cloak, and worn boots. A large silver pendant around her neck caught the light. But what froze my blood was her eyes, wide open, almost glowing, tracking me through the glare of my headlights. She stared directly into my eyes, never breaking contact as I drove by. I was rattled but tried to calm myself. My stereo kicked back on, music resuming as if nothing had happened. I chalked it up to my imagination, the darkness playing tricks on me. Maybe she was just a lost traveler, possibly under the influence. Reservations often struggled with substance abuse issues, I reasoned. I glanced in my rearview mirror. She was gone. I couldn't see her anywhere. Maybe she was too far back? No, it was too soon for that. It must be too dark, I told myself. I kept driving, trying to process what had happened while forcing myself not to dwell on it. Just as I thought I'd moved past it, another shape appeared ahead. Another person walking alone at night? Impossible. They swayed as they walked along the shoulder, wearing a cloak, with long dark hair trailing down their back. Couldn't be. It was the same woman. But how? She raised her arm again, trying to flag me down. What did she want? I maintained my speed, refusing to stop. My stereo cut out again. Then, she darted into the middle of the road, arms flailing wildly. I swerved into the opposite lane, barely missing her. In my headlights, I saw those same wide, unblinking eyes locked onto mine. Her appearance had changed. Her clothes were now filthy, shredded, hanging off her gaunt frame. Her hair was matted with dirt, tangled in knots. But her eyes were unchanged, piercing through me. My heart pounded as I struggled to breathe. I slowed slightly and checked my rearview mirror to see if she was okay. What I saw defied all reason. She was running, sprinting after me. I straightened the wheel and floored the gas, desperate to put distance between us. But the faster I went, the faster she ran, keeping pace effortlessly, her figure illuminated red by my taillights. My head throbbed, my hands slick with sweat on the steering wheel. I felt nauseous. This couldn't be happening. I scanned the horizon for any sign of lights from the town ahead, but I was still too far. I checked the mirror again. She was gone. I should have felt relief, but I knew better. Where had she gone? I looked around, trying to spot her. Nothing. I took a deep breath and focused on the road, staying vigilant. Just keep driving, I told myself. Only a few more miles. Then, out of the corner of my left eye, I saw something. Another shape. It didn't look like the woman, at least not at first. I glanced over, bracing myself. It was an animal, or so I thought. In the moonlight, it ran alongside my car, its legs stretching in long, unnatural strides, its body moving in a way no animal should. As it got closer, I saw more. Its legs were too long, its body too compact. It had no tail. Its head was unnaturally round, and trailing from it was a mass of long, dark hair. I slammed the accelerator, pushing my car to its limits. I hit 115 miles per hour, faster than I'd ever driven. But the creature kept up, unfazed, matching my speed with ease. What was this thing? How could anything run this fast? It seemed to have infinite stamina. How long could it keep going? My car was nearing its maximum speed. If it overheated or ran out of gas, what would happen when this thing caught me? At 120 miles per hour, my Civic couldn't go any faster. The temperature gauge was in the red, the engine screaming. I couldn't sustain this. Then, like a lifeline in a storm, I saw the faint lights of chloride on the horizon. I was almost there. If I could hold on just a bit longer, I'd reach safety. I focused on the lights, growing brighter as I approached. Though it was a tiny town, it felt like salvation. I glanced to my left. The creature was still there, but it was veering away from the road, slipping into the darkness. My heart was racing, sweat dripping down my face. I looked again. It was gone. This time, the dread went with it. My stereo came back on, music filling the car once more. I let out a shaky breath and eased off the gas. Whatever that woman, that creature was, it was gone. My hands ached from gripping the wheel so tightly, but I'd made it through. A week later, I shared the story with a fellow soldier in my unit who grew up in Phoenix. She knew the local legends of the Southwest and hinted at a creature she wouldn't name. She also mentioned that Route 93 was notorious for paranormal activity. She suggested I look up its old nickname online, saying it would explain everything. Take care out there. I'm a 32-year-old man named Ryan, and this happened just 2 nights ago. My partner, Alex, and I were sitting on our back deck, sharing a late-night coffee. It was around 10 p.m. We live deep in the countryside off a quiet highway in Tennessee, a stretch that connects 2 major interstates. The night was peaceful, filled with the sound of frogs croaking, a rare break from the usual rumble of passing trucks. I heard a noise and motioned for Alex to listen, even though he hadn't spoken. It sounded like shouting, desperate, panicked shouting. It was a man, his voice raw with terror, yelling, "Somebody help me, please." Alex and I exchanged a look, both of us on edge. The shouts grew louder, closer. I could make out a figure sprinting along the highway's shoulder, heading toward the stretch in front of our property. Our house sits a fair distance from the road, but close enough to see clearly. If we could see him, he could see us. We don't have any outdoor lights. A dumb oversight, I know, so we were cloaked in darkness. The highway was lit faintly by the glow of a neighbor's floodlight across the road. I dropped my coffee mug on the deck and stepped back toward the door, pulling out my phone to dial 911. The man was still on the shoulder, shouting for help. None of the other houses nearby seemed to react. If they heard, they didn't care. Alex rushed inside, grabbing his coat and boots. I told him to stay put, but he ignored me and got ready to head out. As he disappeared into the house, I saw a black pickup truck speed up the highway and screech to a stop near the man. The highway separated them, but I could hear the driver, a woman, screaming threats, calling him a coward and saying she'd make him regret running. It looked like she was tossing things out her window, maybe his belongings. The man bolted straight toward our yard. I was already on the phone with 911, but living so far out in the sticks meant it'd take the police a while to reach us. I shouted for Alex and told our 10-year-old daughter, who was in her room with her younger brother, to stay there and lock the door. She could hear the commotion and was visibly scared. Alex ran out to the deck and into the yard, approaching the man. He asked if he was okay. The man, panting, explained he'd hitched a ride with the woman after a late shift. Halfway down the highway, she started acting erratic, refusing to stop where he'd asked. When he glanced at the back seat, he saw a rope and a knife. Terrified, he jumped out of the moving truck and started running, yelling for help. Alex guided the man toward the house, now also on the phone with the police, relaying details I couldn't provide in my initial call. The dispatcher told him to stay on the line until officers arrived. We brought the man inside, locking the door, knob, deadbolt, and chain. His face was a mess, scraped and bloody from the fall, and he said the woman had struck him before he escaped. We stood near the window watching for the police. Alex updated the dispatcher. "No, they're not here yet. Yes, her truck is still across the highway. A black pickup near a house with a bright floodlight." I was trying to stay calm when a loud bang echoed from the door. The woman was outside, shouting, "I know you're in there. You can't hide. They can't save you." I yelled back, telling her to leave our property and that the police were on their way. Her response chilled me. "Call them. I don't care. They won't get here in time." Bang, bang, bang. She kept pounding on the door. The man was trembling, begging us to help him. I ran to the kitchen, grabbing a butcher knife just in case. Our door was sturdy, but the windows weren't. If she wanted in, she could break them. Alex returned from our bedroom with his rifle just as a police cruiser pulled into the yard, followed by two more, with another stopping across the highway by her truck. She fled on foot into the woods. The officers helped the man, who lived just a few houses down the highway, and ensured he got home safely. 2 hours later, they still hadn't found the woman. These woods have endless hiding spots. I just hope she stays far away. A terrifying encounter on a Montana highway. I've been an over-the-road trucker for a few months now, and I thought this job would be a thrilling way to see the country and come home with stories for my loved ones. I was right. It's exciting, but not in the way I expected. I've learned it's better not to share these tales with friends or family. Not because I don't trust them, but because I'm afraid they'd never believe me. Let me introduce myself. My name is Caleb, I'm 24, and I've been working for a major trucking company. I won't name it, for obvious reasons. Since finishing my training and getting my own rig for solo runs, I've seen some bizarre things. When you're driving on a remote stretch like US Route 2 in Montana, known as one of the most isolated highways in the state, the emptiness can mess with your head. I suppose it was inevitable that I'd encounter something strange in the dead of night, out in the plains. I was still an hour away from the nearest truck stop, fighting to stay awake by cranking the heat in my cab to an uncomfortable level. I know it sounds reckless, but unless you've worked this job, you wouldn't understand how easy it is to let your guard down. It was a frigid fall night, the darkness absolute as I drove through the vast grasslands, when something darted across the road ahead of me. It was gone before I could react, disappearing into the tall grass on the other side. I only caught a glimpse, but it looked like a massive, pale coyote, moving faster than any animal I'd ever seen. I tried to brush it off and keep going. Animals cross highways at night all the time. It didn't seem worth worrying about. Less than a minute later, my truck jolted violently to the right, veering toward the shoulder. I yanked the wheel to correct it, gently tapping the brakes to avoid a disaster. Jackknifing an 80,000-pound rig is a real risk. I slowed down, regained control, and found a safe spot to pull over so I could check for damage. I parked, engaged the brakes, and hopped out, walking to the passenger side of my trailer. There, I found a massive dent about 4 feet wide and tall, shapeless but deep. I muttered, "What the hell?" as I inspected it. What could have hit me that hard? I thought maybe a large animal had collided with the trailer, but there were no hills or rocks around, just flat, open plains as far as I knew. Then I heard gravel crunching behind me. My heart stopped as I turned and saw something standing about 40 feet away. It was huge, menacing, and pale. Words can't fully capture what I saw. It resembled a dog, but only vaguely. It stood on 2 thick, stubby legs, with unnaturally long forelimbs that hung past its midsection. Its shoulders were wide and heaving, as if it had just sprinted a great distance. The head was canine-like, with a long muzzle filled with jagged, gleaming teeth, drool dripping as it growled. Its eyes were pitch black, glaring at me with a mix of malice and hunger. I was paralyzed with fear. This thing stood between me and my truck, my only escape. We locked eyes for what felt like an eternity until I broke the silence, stammering, "You're one nasty-looking beast." It let out a deep, guttural snarl, but then, to my shock, it turned and lumbered away on all fours, moving deliberately into the grass and vanishing into the night. I stood frozen for what seemed like minutes, expecting it to leap back out and attack at any second. Didn't. I bolted to the driver's side, jumped into the cab, locked the doors, and peeled out as fast as an 18-wheeler can go, which isn't fast at all. Soon, I was back on the highway, driving like my life depended on it. For a while, it felt like it did. About 45 minutes later, I reached the truck stop and shut down for the night. Sleep didn't come easily. I was convinced every sound was that creature returning. Thankfully, the rest of the night passed without incident. I've got more stories to share, but this one's long enough for now. Stay safe out there on the roads. You never know what's lurking in the dark with you.